This fast track video, my name is Ed. I do have some rubs here. I will be going into another video regarding cooking shortly, but I want to go over something that is very important because I've been procrastinating with this, and I really wanted to get something out for people to understand. I have a web development programming background. I started this in the mid-90s, but prior to the mid-90s, ever since 1979, I was more of a graphics person. When I came to the mid-90s, I started getting into HTML, started building web pages. It was more like a brochure-like stuff at that time. However, I was also being innovative. I was trying to think of ways to market in more ways than one. I've seen how at that time for print, magazine full-page publications were anywhere from $8,000 to $30,000 for an ad. And I started thinking there's probably more than one way to do this. You know, we can advertise for print, we can advertise for HTML, and we can advertise through floppy disk or CD-ROM. And I tried to market that out, but I wasn't so successful because I didn't have the investors to stand in my area of seeing potential with that. Other businesses had that, I just did not. So that's where I was unable to pursue those things. So when I started running out of money from making major investments into software for Macintosh and PC, I started to get moved more directly into working for somebody, and I started working at a startup company which eventually had some big clients like Oakley and Capcom. They had work alongside another business with regards to Sony Pictures, and those things were really exciting times for me. I only lasted 6 months with that because I was on a not a full-time job perspective. I was more of a little 1% trade-off, making a small portion of money. I just wanted to get my feet wet with that because in 1997 I started working for a post-production house, and in that post-production house they had big top name companies too, like Major League Soccer, Yes, Jeans, Mattel Toys. There was a lot of corporate businesses that was outsourcing web development work because they didn't know how to deal with it in-house or internally. Supply and demand of programmers and developers were really high at that time. So then came the .NET crash. I couldn't work there too long either. I only lasted about 3 or 4 months before there was a merge that took place with the post-production house. Then I started to work with a testing company that had close relationships with Microsoft, and I started working there for 5 years. After that, then I started to be on a lull, and I was being a contractor / trying to get some of my own clients. And it was really difficult. It became more and more challenging. I always thought of myself as being one against 1,000 people, and 1,000 people was Microsoft because they were building and doing exciting things, but I was not connected with them in some way, shape, or form. On another note, in the late 1990s, I had a client that needed a website developed, and I took the job. It was a $10,000 project alongside with my full-time job. And with that being said, what happened was they wanted some custom web forms made where the web forms would send off an email, would populate some data into a text file. It was no different than a software company saying, you know, try us for 30 days, we'll give you a password, but you have to fill out some information about you so that way then we get to know you and what you're trying to do with the software that you're downloading and installing. With that being said, I didn't have that knowledge of doing those things, and this is one of the things that I've always kept in my back burner of learning in life. I never want to not work. I want to work, but when I do have challenging situations like a web form that I don't know how to do, I will hire somebody to work alongside me and then have them build it for me. And then after it's built, I would hack into it and then understand what they did. And that's what the case with that $10,000 project. If I gave one person $750, he was a Perl programmer, gave me the Perl code back, the source information, and I was able to hack into it and build about 8 other components of software packages for this project. So, and that worked really good for me. So that was where I started to learn things in a business perspective of how to get projects. And at the same time that I get projects, I'm getting a little bit of some sort of a perk per se. And in the case with me was I was hiring someone to build something for me off to the side, but my client didn't know anything about that. And then I would get the project in, design it, program it, and then it was done. I've seen programmers over the years that they would, in their billing and their proposals, that they would say, we need, a $5,000 piece of software, and in order for me to do this project correctly, I need this software, and they would give it to me. Businesses aren't always that frugal. There are some that will be saying to us programmers, we need that job, and if we do have to spend an extra few $1,000s on something, we'll do it. I don't know if that's the case for everybody, because I'm only speaking on behalf of my history, of my experience as a programmer. Some people, they started to work all by themselves and they started to pick up clients. And what's really nice about picking up clients, let's say 1 year, is 3 years later they get the project done in the first year, but then 3 years later these clients are calling you back, and you can end up billing out a little more than what you did initially. So when people are thinking about money in terms of programming, it's kind of nice that you start off, if you're really like hungry for work, to start off with something a little less and see, but never less to the point where you're just, struggling. I was in the position where I was just turning dollars a little bit with what I was doing. If you understand turning dollars, that was me per se. I wasn't really trying to profit, I was just trying to get my name out there per se. So, but then after you get a couple projects in your pocket and you're moving forward, you can start to adjust things. I never want to end up having like 3 or 4 projects, and out of the 3, 2 of them are cheap, and let's say the other 2 are really good, that I focus so much on the good people that are giving me good amounts of money that I basically negate the other 2 customers that I agreed that I was going to work with them. That's bad business practice. At least for me it is, because I don't like to mistreat people. I mean, they're trying to make a living too. So if anything, in all honesty, maybe that I would just tell them, look, I don't know. I mean, just for me, I just can't do something like that. It's just not my personality. If I've got 4 businesses doing work with me right now, then each one of them are going to get my undivided attention equally. Whether they're paying me more or not, it's just the way it is. Otherwise, and I start to get some other people that I would hire along with me. Typical business practices. I take some of the money that I'm making good money on, and I try to trickle that off to getting someone else to work alongside me. So anyways, that's the money situation. Here's another situation. I started off with HTML in 1995, went into active server pages in 1997, and stayed in active server pages all the way through the .NET, VB.NET, Java.NET, C++ .NET and C++, C#.NET. I still work with active server pages. I did do VB.NET for some ASP.NET web applications. But why was it that I just stayed in that realm of just active server pages? It was mainly because when I didn't take the route of working on my own. I just still felt like I needed a long-term stability of work constantly moving, because some of my contract work was going in and out, and as it was going in and out, the dry spots I had no money and I couldn't end up paying for the rent or anything. That became very challenging for me, and that's one thing I highly recommend if you're a programmer, is definitely have a couple hedge hunters that are headhunters that are trying to work with you in getting you work, because I just didn't seem to have it. I did get them sporadically, but it wasn't consistently, and that's what I needed, was consistency. And if I wasn't getting it from recruiters, then I have to go back to work full-time as a programmer. And that's just what I did. In 2004, I started working with a dental lab, which I still am working today. And amazingly enough, I'm making the same amount of money that I was when I was working at the testing company a long time ago, about 20 years ago. I'm not really making an awful lot of money as a programmer, but nevertheless, I'm happy doing the work that I'm doing. And I'm not going beyond my means in terms of surviving and having the lifestyle I would like to have. If your lifestyle is to be very cushy and you want to have all the nice things in life, then you're really going to have to earn it, per se. It's just like I told my older son in terms of baseball. You want that spot in that field, or in that, in offensive and defensive playing, you got to earn that spot. So that means you're going to really have to work on it to get it. So, and that's the same case with me and anything in terms of work. So with that being said, because I didn't go the route of being on my own, although it seems as though it would have been better that I did. On another note I want to bring up is mentors, is people that I've, programmers and some designers in the past that all of a sudden I just got very intrigued with. I think when I first started in high school, when my first year I was a production artist, and I made enough money for the school to pay for the school newspaper for the whole year. They didn't have to pay a dime. That's when I started to think, I should start doing this as a profession in my life, because I saw that I could do these things. But ever since I started meeting up with people that have been doing it for 18, 19 years, or they had some really nice, I like their workflow, per se. And those kind of people I kind of sunk into just trying to learn what they knew. And as I started to know in terms of prototype setting back in the early 1980s, the desktop publishing, I started to do that and learn that on my own. I still needed some extra, I needed to know where I was in terms of what I knew. And when I met up with people that had high degrees, like Otis Parsons with honors, I met up with a guy, and I said to myself, I want to learn his technique. And so when I was working at a business, a web design firm in 1996, for about 3 months I started to study him. And that's when I started to pick up his technique. And when I picked up his technique, it was like, I think I can do this on my own now. And then the same thing with the web developer. I met a real good friend of mine, although I wanted to know more, and I was very limited with this person. But nevertheless, I really appreciated him as well. He really got my feet wet in terms of programming for web application-like stuff. And it became intriguing, to say the least. The stuff I do now, from login information, from data pulled up on SQL, to making online payments or doing an e-commerce site, complex applications to transmit files and information dynamically. All those things I grew into. I just started to think about a lot. But most of all, I'll be honest with everybody, I'm a godly person, so a lot of it I give credit to God. This is not me that does it. And I think one of the things in terms of where I work right now is I used to blame the owner for a lot of my mishaps, but then I realized that wasn't so much the owner. I put myself into the position of being at this job for such a long time. It wasn't him, it was me. I never really wanted to jump out of where I was. I was struggling a little bit in the beginning, but eventually it smoothed out. And when it smoothed out, it was like I just didn't take the initiative to move forward. Today I do try to move forward, but I'm very specific to what I'm looking for when I'm working. I'd like to really run a project or projects, be a project manager today, as opposed to one that just does a lot of grunt work coding. So with that being said, I'm trying to see where I want to go with this conversation here, with this message, because there's so much involvement with it. I don't want to ramble, but I don't want to really, just like I'm missing something with what I'm trying to say here. The way I work today is more, I give God the credit for all the things that I don't know, because He puts it in perspective with things that I'm working on and then I do know. A good example that I hit with some really good people online on YouTube was that, for instance, Adobe has a tendency of bailing out of software, and one of them that I think was really important, it was important to me because I started to dabble into it and I thought it was really good, is Adobe Muse. And then all of a sudden it bails out and they're no longer doing it anymore. And it reminds me of all the other softwares Adobe has done very much like that in the past. For one example, I think it was the starting point with Macromedia. Macromedia had 6 or 7 softwares, and one of them was Macromedia Director, which started off with Shockwave and which became Flash. And now even Flash is abandoning now because of all the different viruses that take place with that. So with all that being said, and there's a programming language involved with that called Lingo. So there's a lot of complexities, but one thing I didn't like so much with Adobe was when I was so hooked into a Layer home site, which Macromedia bought originally, and then Macromedia did nothing with it. Adobe buys out Macromedia, and now that software is just dumped into no man's land. But I've used that software all the way up to last year. And it wasn't until this year that, with where I'm working, they're updating patches and software and stuff, and my 32-bit piece of software that I've used for almost 20 years, pretty much 20 years, it's gone. I can't use it anymore unless I go into like a 32-bit environment. The applications and software updates and patches have basically prevented me from using it. That stuff, along with Adobe Muse, along with anything that seems to be like a software that's been out, like even Microsoft. Microsoft starts up with .NET, and now 15 years later, now it's MVC, and they're trying to change over the concepts of work. I'm hearing from really good people now with master's degrees in programming that they're saying that the future is going to be more towards Java, JavaScript, or JSON, jQuery. And so now I'm like, well, I'm glad that I really didn't spend all this years trying to learn from one software to another, to another, to another. And in the case of like today with Adobe Muse, now it's Adobe XD. How much more will a programmer have to deal with the concept of change over one year to another? And this is where I'm trying to bring some comfort to a programmer, if you're watching this right now, is work with what you have, because when you get clients and people that are interested in you, they'll do one of two things. If they see that you want to learn, they're going to probably throw out software and get you up to speed with things. I do get that right now. However, the things that I'm learning right now regarding some softwares, it kind of reminds me of software that was built by Microsoft in the year 2000. And that makes me feel uncomfortable, because a lot of times with my programming, if someone says I need something done and I need it done now, I can bang it out with what I know. But if you throw me into something that has all these buttons and do it, WYSIWYG kind of stuff where I have to check this, check that, and then from there it goes, well, if you check that, then you have these series of questions you got to answer too to get something done. If it's really something that needs to be done in 20 minutes, it seems as though these new software applications for web development is becoming more cumbersome or more top-heavy, and with that being done, then it makes it more difficult for me to get around it. I'm a hard coder. I mean, I've done enough of this stuff to build applications, and I think that's the benefit behind people that have got to a point where they're comfortable with the software or comfortable with a programming language. It's like, you know, I don't need to know, you know, how to build another vehicle. You know, kind of like I need to build a Tesla now because Teslas weren't around 10 years ago. I've got to learn Tesla. If what I'm using right now still gets me from point A to point B, just like a Tesla, and the only difference behind it is just the look and the bells and whistles in it, you know, what's the end product? I mean, the bottom line with projects and applications, and I've learned this really the biggest in the late 1990s, when I was getting so hooked up with Shockwave and Flash and Macromedia Director products at that time. Those are great for animated companies, for anything that's related to the film industry, special effects, special design concepts and elements involved with it. But in terms of a corporate environment, it really is not. It really is not. They like things that are clean and simple. And so the way I built my logic is from things that are like Mickey Mouse. I can do Mickey Mouse designs, or I can do something with Illustrator and build animations and things related to Disney, let's say, for instance. But if I'm dealing something like Microsoft, if I'm dealing something where it's a corporate company and the corporate company has to have a nice look, if it's Neiman Marcus, it has to have an elegant look. You have to learn and understand the personalities because they're different in nature. They're not the same. I can't take what I was doing in the 1990s when I was working with East Coast production houses with Sega, Soft, and Mattel Toys, and some of these other animated like companies like Capcom. I couldn't take that and bring it into a corporate realm, because from taking it into a corporate realm, then it makes them look silly, and that's not what they're looking for. So there's a personality, there's a perspective of trying to do things, programming-wise and design-wise. And I've done enough of these things to, you know, emphasize these things clearly to everybody here to tell you this is what 1995 to today is. Today, for me, I'm still working where I'm working 15 years ago. I'm okay with it. I enjoy the work that I'm doing. I'm in a business that gives me work that is programming oriented, but also work that is design and for print and graphics. Because all of a sudden I started to build this dual platform in my life, and I've had it ever since the mid-90s. And this dual platform helped me get the jobs that I needed, or the job I needed long term. And that may be the case with regards to you as a designer or a programmer, is that you find this kind of unique niche that is something that other people don't have. You know, it could be, you know, the designing CAD/CAM stuff and then being able to work with SQL, you know, and you just start to do things that are a little bit out of the unordinary. And it becomes ordinary to you, and then you're able to end up doing something that eventually you'll fit into a company that actually needs both of them, and they need someone like you to do those things respectively. So I think I covered the generational things in regards to software. I talked a little bit about money, and the way to build it is just get clientele on your pocket. You know, if you're doing this on your own or as with contractors and stuff, because I've seen this in the past with me, even as a contractor, you know, I may get into something and out of something in 6 months, and then 2 years later I'm back with that contract with that company again, and I'm doing something more. And when those things happen, that, you know, if it's my own client, that's where I can end up building out things a little bit more, and it becomes more rewarding. Because here's the thing, you know, it's a mutual thing. A person comes to you, says, I need something programmed, you program it. But they don't know what you're doing, number one. And number two, if it turns out that they need some more work done 2 years from now, they only know that you knew and wrote it and built it and designed it, so they're always going to come back to you, unless they say, well, you know, I didn't really like the way he was doing his work, the quality wasn't that good. Now that's a different story. And then he starts to go out looking. Now that's going to take time for him to find someone that's like me. You know, in the terms of my coding of what I do today, it's still working with active server pages and hard coding things and knowing what I'm doing with JavaScript, with hard code. It becomes a little more challenging for a company to say, you know, wow, you know, we've got to keep this guy here. But then on the other hand, they can say, well, we're going to start to learn to migrate up to the latest technologies here so that we don't need to be dependent on someone like me. And then there, for me, now I become a challenge on a little bit of a vulnerable position for myself. Nevertheless, I put my trust in God. I mean, I'm already up there in age, well, maybe not so much yet, but I'm about a dozen years away from retirement. So, I mean, I'm in a position where I can move around a little bit with what I'm doing right now. And I just hope that this message helps you. It encourages you to think out back, you know, how you want to work things. I've seen some really good people do things on their own, and they make a ton of money. And they've even told me, I don't know why you're doing what you're doing, but I'm okay with what I'm doing. There's so much more leverage and control when you're doing things on your own. You've got things moving in a perspective where it's generating revenue, and maybe you can work maybe part-time in a week, making just as much money as I am making full-time, you know. And then from that part-time, you have all this extra time that you can learn other things, more new cutting-edge techniques, being able to see where your workflow is growing into something very intuitive and dynamic that no one else is doing. You always keep yourself on the cutting edge. Yeah. Anyways, have a good day. God bless you. Hope this was beneficial and helpful to you.